story that is, well, getting a lot of attention. A federal investigation of U.S. airlines, with the Justice Department apparently demanding answers from the country's biggest air carriers. A series of bankruptcies and mega mergers over the last decade slimmed down the airline industry, and 4 carriers fly about 80% of us. Interesting. 4 carriers get 80% of the passengers, right? There's suspicion the big 4, American, Delta, United, and Southwest, may have conspired to keep the number of available seats down and prices high. Joining us now, Ben Schlappig is a travel consultant, blogger, and 1 Mile at a Time founder. Jamie Larunas, travel expert and blogger for The Forward Cabin, and Gary Leif, the travel consultant and founder of the blog View from the Wing. It's nice to have you all, because most of us, we go online, we look at, our airline ticket, but we don't look at it every single day. And I know this is something that's a passion for all of you. Ben, is there evidence from what you see on a daily basis and over the last several years that airlines may be communicating about the prices and the seats?
Yeah, I would say at this point, really, it's just speculation. They're talking about collusion, but I think more likely is that it's just coordinated behavior. So the difference being airlines file transparent fares. So in other words, if you go to Orbitz, you can compare fares on various airlines. It's very easy for airlines to track the prices basically others are charging. So I don't necessarily think there's anything going on behind the scenes here. Airlines are simply matching one another on fares for the most part, and that's certainly hurting consumers. But it's not inherently illegal.
Well, it's easy to feel like the world's against us, especially when we're traveling, Jamie.
Yeah,
I'm curious what you think about it. Do you agree with Ben? Maybe the smoke, but no fire?
I do agree. One of the things that you'll notice is that with fares, you'll often find carriers competing with each other out of different hubs. So, for example, if you want a lower fare on Delta, look at cities like Dallas, look at Charlotte, look at Miami. They're often undercutting each other out of those different hubs. So, personally, my opinion is that there is nothing, conspiracy theory going on here. I think they truly are doing well in this market and are trying to compete with each other individually.
Gary, we do see that the Justice Department is looking back to 2010. So, coming out of the really rough financial crisis, really tough economy. They're looking back that far. Why do you think the timing is significant of that?
Well, that's when airfares were at their lowest. It's sort of a convenient time frame to look at because you've seen a lot of increase in fares since then. Although if you go back a couple of years farther, what you're seeing are airfares now that really are just reaching the point that they were before they started to fall. Airfares were falling because people weren't traveling during the recession. At the same time, airlines faced record high fuel prices. So they cut back on the number of flights merely to survive. Airlines were losing hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars at the time. And so they weren't really investing in competing with each other. They were all competing to see who could cut back the fastest. We may ultimately see an email that's embarrassing from one airline or another, but ultimately the driver of the fares that we're seeing now isn't some kind of conspiracy between the airlines. It's the simple outgrowth of the economics of the industry that they were facing.
So, Ben, now airlines are seemingly doing better over the last several years. It is still an astonishing fact that 80% of our air traffic is really with only 4 carriers. And that's something that actually the Justice Department had a role in approving some of these big mergers so that you have these mega airlines. Is that ironic to you at all? I mean, Ben, do you think that is the best for consumers? Because that's what the Department of Justice said, but now they're investigating those same airlines.
Well, it's definitely a double-edged sword. If you look at how the industry was before, a couple of the major carriers were on the brink of liquidation. Ultimately, that would be even worse for consumers if basically not only these airlines went bankrupt, but fares would go up quite a bit as well. So I'd say, is it best for consumers? Probably not, but it's kind of tough to decide what the alternative would be there. That's just kind of the natural result, I think, of how volatile the airline industry is.
And this is the world we live in, and this is the world we're going to be traveling in, Jamie, over the next several days. I mean, a ton of Americans are hitting the road, and I'm just curious, as we kind of finish up here, about whether or not you have any tips. Because, again, it's easy to feel like the airlines are against you as they squeeze you into these little seats and tell you that they're giving you extra room. It's just not a good feeling.
Right, exactly. So one of the tips that you can find is bundling fares. You'll notice airlines are now starting to charge for checked baggage, JetBlue being the most recent. They have bundled fares where if you pay for that baggage up front, you can reduce your cost versus paying for it at the airport. You'll also notice airlines heavily discounting their first class seats. So while most folks are probably traveling in the back, it may not be too much more money to travel up front, get a free meal, get free checked baggage, free lounge access, etc., where that may not be possible in the back. back. Airlines are lowering their fares. You'll notice there's a lot of mileage awards. So if you're using miles and points, that's another strategy. And also utilize your credit card benefits. A lot of them come with free check bags, free priority boarding that can minimize the travel hassle.
Do you have a favorite credit card, Jamie? That's something we've talked about, by the way, on this show. Is there a good credit card for those airfares?
Yeah, a lot of the co-branded cards can benefit you depending on if you travel a specific airline, an American Airlines co-branded card, a Delta co-branded card, and those are specific, of course, to traveling those airlines. Or there's alternative cards that can earn miles and points and other travel benefits across a broad variety of airlines, such as an American Express Platinum card that gets you Centurion Lounge access, for example. So it really depends on what you travel.
Gary, I'll finish up with you. I don't know what tips you have for us because you're flying out of Austin's airport. They got great barbecue there, so you probably don't have that many problems, do you, Gary? I mean, really?
Well, you don't want to leave Austin because of the great barbecue, but it's actually really expensive to fly out of here. That's because simply Austin's grown so much, and there's a limited number of gates. The airlines can't expand that much. Ultimately, what we are seeing now is the airlines, though, battling each other head-to-head in a lot of markets. It's sort of ironic that we're seeing this investigation about collusion at a time that the airlines are beginning to fly more routes and compete much more aggressively. I'd say, though, that the one thing that the government could do if they really cared about airfares and capacity is that they could relax foreign ownership restrictions, and then you'd bring in more competitors. So instead of complaining that there must be some sort of a cabal amongst the airlines, we could actually do something about it, which this investigation doesn't. We'll see where the investigation goes.
Sure.
But ultimately, I think you want to consumers have to be particularly savvy and careful, know what a route usually is supposed to cost. What does it cost most of the time? If the airfare is higher than that, wait, and if it's lower than that, pounce.
Right.
Book your fares about 90 days out to 120 days when you can for leisure travel, because you'll lock in the best deals then. And in the meantime, wait as times get good in the airlines and they're finally making money, they're going to expand, and that'll drive down prices.
Okay, well, you give us a lot of reason to hope, Gary. That's good. And we have to plan ahead. We really do. We got to watch those last minute deals, but also, 90 days probably is wise. Gary, Jamie, and Ben, great to have you all. Really enjoy it.